Story 1. The Hitchhiker on Route 16. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 now, but this happened when I was 26 and working as a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company. My job required a lot of driving between small towns to visit doctors' offices and clinics, often late into the evening after they closed for regular patients. This particular night, I was driving back from a small town in the western part of my state, heading home after a long day of appointments. It was mid-October, around 11:30 p.m., and I was on Route 16, a two-lane highway that cuts through miles of dense forest and farmland with very few towns or service stations along the way. Anyone who's driven rural highways at night knows how isolating they can feel. Just you, your headlights, and the endless darkness beyond. I'd made this drive dozens of times, so I wasn't particularly concerned despite the late hour. My GPS showed about an hour and 20 minutes left before I'd reach home. The radio was playing softly, and I was mentally reviewing my appointments for the next day. The weather had turned drizzly, and a light fog was beginning to form in patches along the road. Not thick enough to be dangerous, but enough that I reduced my speed slightly and paid more careful attention. The traffic was practically non-existent. I hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes. I rounded a bend, and my headlights swept across something that made me instinctively hit the brakes. A figure standing at the edge of the road, arm extended in the universal hitchhiking gesture. It was a woman, probably in her late 20s or early 30s, wearing jeans and a light-colored jacket. Her hair was dark and wet from the drizzle, plastered against her face. Now I know better than to pick up hitchhikers, especially on isolated roads at night. But something about the situation struck me as deeply wrong. We were at least 15 miles from the nearest town in either direction. How had she gotten out here? Why was she alone on this road so late at night? She didn't appear to have any bags or belongings with her. I slowed down but didn't stop, intending to pass by. As my car drew level with her, she turned to look directly at me, and even through the rain-streaked window, I could see her expression clearly in my headlights. Her face was unnaturally pale, almost gray, and her eyes seemed too dark, like the pupils had expanded to fill the entire iris. But what really unsettled me was her expression, completely blank, devoid of any emotion you'd expect from someone stranded in the rain at night, like fear, desperation, or relief at seeing a car. Something in my gut screamed danger. I accelerated past her, watching in my rearview mirror as her head pivoted to follow my car, that blank expression never changing. About half a mile down the road, my conscience started nagging at me. What if she was in genuine trouble? What if she'd been in an accident or was fleeing from something? I couldn't just leave someone stranded out here. I decided to call 911 to report her location so they could send someone to help. I pulled over onto the shoulder, put on my hazards, and dialed 911. While the phone was ringing, I looked in my rearview mirror again and felt my blood freeze. The woman was walking down the middle of the road toward my car, not on the shoulder, not hurrying for help, just walking steadily down the center line. Given the distance I'd driven since passing her, she couldn't possibly have reached this point so quickly on foot. Yet there she was, getting closer with each second. The 911 operator answered, and I frantically explained the situation, giving my location and describing the woman. The operator tried to calm me down, asking if the woman seemed injured or in distress. No, she's just walking. But she shouldn't be here yet. She couldn't have... I stopped mid-sentence as I looked in my mirror again. The road behind me was empty. I twisted in my seat to look out my back window, then checked all my mirrors. There was no sign of the woman anywhere. The operator asked if I was still there, and I stammered something about having lost sight of her. They assured me they would send a patrol car to check the area and suggested I continue on my way. I agreed, thanked them, and hung up. My hands were shaking as I put the car back in drive. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I'd gone perhaps another quarter mile when my headlights illuminated something ahead. The woman was standing in the middle of my lane, facing my approaching car, that same blank expression on her face. It was impossible. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of me. I swerved instinctively, nearly running off the road before regaining control. When I looked back, she was gone again. I pressed the accelerator hard, pushing well above the speed limit, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever was happening. The next 10 minutes passed in tense silence as I sped down the highway, constantly checking my mirrors and scanning the road ahead. Just as I was starting to think I'd left the nightmare behind, my car radio, which had been playing quietly all this time, suddenly filled with static. The display flickered and went dark, then came back on but showed no station information. Through the static, I could hear what sounded like a woman's voice, too distorted to make out words, but with a rhythm that suggested speech. I jabbed at the power button, but the radio continued. I was about to disconnect the fuse when the static abruptly cleared, and I heard 3 words spoken clearly. "Stop the car." I nearly lost control again as I saw the woman standing directly in the road ahead, so close I should have hit her. I slammed on the brakes, skidding on the wet pavement. My car went into a spin and slid off the road, coming to rest in the gravel at an angle facing the forest. When the world stopped spinning, I sat there gasping for breath, knuckles white on the steering wheel. My headlights illuminated nothing but trees and underbrush. The radio was silent, displaying the normal station information again as if nothing had happened. With shaking hands, I put the car in drive and carefully maneuvered back onto the road. I drove the rest of the way home with the radio off, jumping at every shadow and curve in the road. I made it home without further incident, but spent a sleepless night replaying the events in my mind. The next day, I called the local police department for the area where I'd been driving. I asked if they'd followed up on my 911 call about the hitchhiker. The officer I spoke with checked the records and confirmed a patrol car had been dispatched to the area about 20 minutes after my call. They had driven the entire stretch of Route 16 for miles in either direction from where I'd reported the woman, but found no one walking along the road. What the officer said next made my skin crawl. Route 16 had a history of similar reports dating back decades. Drivers seeing a woman hitchhiking at night, always in the same general area, always described as having an unnaturally pale complexion and dark eyes. Local legend connected these sightings to an unsolved case from 1973, when a young woman had gone missing after her car broke down on that highway. Her body was found 2 weeks later in the woods, partially hidden under brush, with evidence suggesting she had initially survived the crash and tried to flag down help. I've changed my driving routes since then, even when it means adding an extra hour to my trips. Sometimes the long way around is the only safe path, and some roads are best left untraveled after dark. To this day, whenever I hear static on my car radio, I immediately turn it off. Some voices should remain unheard, some faces unseen. And if you're ever driving Route 16 at night and see a woman hitchhiking in the rain, don't slow down, don't look back, just drive. Story 2. The following headlights. I'm Rachel, 31 years old, and what I'm about to share happened 3 years ago during a long drive from my parents' home back to my apartment in the city. I'd been visiting them for the weekend at their rural home, about 4 hours away from where I live. I left later than planned, around 9:30 p.m. on Sunday night, because we'd lost track of time during dinner and conversation. The route between their house and my apartment involves about 2 hours on major highways, followed by another 2 hours on smaller state and county roads that wind through less populated areas. I wasn't thrilled about making the drive so late, but I had work early the next morning and couldn't afford to take a day off. The first half of the journey was uneventful. Traffic was light given the hour, and I made good time on the highways. I stopped at a gas station just off the exit where I transitioned to the smaller roads, topping off my tank and grabbing coffee to help stay alert for the remainder of the drive. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when I pulled back onto the road. This next stretch was significantly darker and more isolated. The road narrowed to 2 lanes, Streetlights became sparse and eventually non-existent, and the terrain changed to rolling hills with dense woods on either side. I'd made this drive many times before and knew there were only a handful of small towns along the way, with miles of nothing in between them. About 20 minutes into this portion of the drive, I noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. There was nothing unusual about this. It was a public road after all, but something about these particular headlights caught my attention. They seemed to be positioned higher than normal, like those of a large truck or SUV, and they had a distinctive bluish-white tint that stood out in the darkness. The vehicles stayed a consistent distance behind me for several miles, not close enough to be tailgating, but always there. I didn't think much of it until I realized we had gone through one of the small towns where the speed limit dropped, and there were multiple turn options, yet the vehicle had maintained exactly the same distance behind me. That's when I started paying more attention. We were now on a particularly remote stretch with no towns for at least 30 miles. The road curved and dipped through forested hills, with occasional farmhouses set far back from the pavement, their lights tiny pinpricks in the vast darkness. I increased my speed slightly, going about 5 miles over the limit. The headlights behind me matched my pace exactly. I slowed down to 10 miles below the limit. Again, the distance between us remained unchanged. This was when the first twinges of unease crept in. It seemed this vehicle was intentionally following me. To test my theory, I made a turn onto a side road that I knew reconnected with my route a few miles ahead. It wasn't a logical turn for someone simply traveling the main highway. It was longer, and the road quality was poorer. The headlights disappeared from my mirror momentarily, and I felt a flood of relief. That relief was short-lived. Less than a minute later, the same distinctive headlights appeared behind me again. There had been no time for the driver to realize their mistake and turn around if they had missed their intended route. They had deliberately followed my unexpected turn. My heart rate accelerated. I was now certain I was being followed, though I had no idea why. I hadn't cut anyone off or had any road rage incidents. My car was an ordinary sedan, nothing that would attract thieves. I was alone, a woman driving at night. Perhaps that was reason enough for someone with bad intentions. I tried to think logically about my options. I could call the police, but out here, response times would be long. There were no open businesses where I could seek help, and I was hesitant to stop at a random house in the middle of nowhere. My best option seemed to be maintaining speed and continuing toward more populated areas. I pulled my phone from my purse and placed it in my lap, ready to dial 911 if the situation escalated. Then I noticed something odd. My phone showed no signal. This was unusual. While reception could be spotty in these rural areas, I generally maintained at least a weak connection. Now, there was nothing. The next 20 minutes were among the most tense of my life. The headlights maintained their perfect distance behind me through every curve and hill. I fluctuated between trying to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was just someone going to the same destination. Maybe a police officer conducting a subtle patrol. And imagining worst-case scenarios if the vehicle forced me to stop. Then things got stranger. As the road descended into a particularly dark valley, I noticed the headlights behind me seemed to change. The bluish-white color intensified, and they appeared to rise higher, as if the vehicle had suddenly grown taller. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to spread wider apart, expanding to a distance that didn't make sense for any normal vehicle. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. What I was seeing defied logical explanation, yet I couldn't deny what was right there in my mirrors. The lights continued to transform, splitting and multiplying until it looked like there were 4 or 6 headlights instead of 2, arranged in an unnatural pattern. A wave of cold washed over me despite the heater running. I pressed the accelerator harder, pushing my car faster than was safe on these winding roads. The headlights accelerated too, maintaining that same eerie distance. No matter how fast I drove, I couldn't escape them. Just as my panic was reaching its peak, I crested a hill and saw the welcome glow of lights ahead. The outskirts of a larger town I knew was along my route. The sight of streetlights and buildings brought a surge of relief. Surely whatever was happening would stop once I reached civilization. As I approached the first intersection with a traffic light, I glanced in my rear-view mirror again. The strange configuration of headlights was gone, replaced by normal-looking headlights of what appeared to be a dark-colored pickup truck. The truck slowed, as I did for the red light, stopping a car's length behind me. For the first time in nearly an hour, I had cell reception again. My phone immediately chimed with missed notifications. I considered calling 911 now that I could, but what would I say? That some headlights had followed me and looked weird? That didn't seem like an emergency now that I was in town with other cars around. When the light turned green, I proceeded straight through the intersection. To my immense relief, the truck behind me turned right. I watched it disappear down a side street, its taillights receding into the distance. The remainder of my drive was uneventful, and I reached my apartment around 2 a.m., exhausted and still shaken. I might have dismissed the entire experience as road fatigue or an overactive imagination if not for what happened next. 3 days later, a local news report caught my attention. A woman had gone missing while driving alone at night on the same stretch of road where I'd had my experience. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road, keys still in the ignition, no sign of a struggle. The article mentioned it was the third such disappearance in the area over the past decade, all following the same pattern. What haunts me most is the detail mentioned by a witness who had driven past the most recent missing woman's location shortly before her estimated disappearance. They reported seeing her car pulled over, with what appeared to be a dark pickup truck parked behind her, multiple bright bluish-white lights illuminating the scene. I don't know what would have happened if I had pulled over that night. I don't know what happened to those women who disappeared. All I know is that sometimes things follow us on dark roads, things that might not be exactly what they appear to be. And when you're alone at night, with strange lights in your mirror, the safest course is to keep driving until you reach the light. Story 3. The Detour. My name is Eric. I'm 29 years old and work as a long-haul truck driver. I've been driving commercially for about 7 years now, covering routes all across the country. When you spend as much time on the road as I do, especially at night, you develop a certain comfort with solitude and darkness. Or at least, I thought I had, until what happened on Route 302 last winter. It was early December and I was hauling a load from Denver to Seattle. I'd been driving since early morning and was making good time despite the weather turning increasingly nasty as the day progressed. By nightfall, I was crossing through a particularly remote part of Idaho, with heavy snow beginning to fall and temperatures dropping rapidly. Route 302 isn't a major highway. It's one of those secondary roads that cuts through wilderness areas with very little in terms of services or towns. Under normal circumstances, I might have stopped at a motel for the night given the deteriorating conditions, but I was on a tight delivery schedule and needed to push through if possible. Around 10 p.m., the snowfall intensified dramatically. Visibility dropped to maybe 30 feet ahead, and the road surface was becoming dangerously slick. I reduced my speed to a crawl, focusing intently on keeping the truck on the increasingly invisible road. The cab heater was blasting, but I could still feel the biting cold seeping in around the windows. I was considering pulling over to wait out the worst of the storm when my GPS alerted me to an upcoming road closure due to a snowdrift. It calculated an alternate route, directing me to take the next exit and follow a series of smaller county roads that would eventually reconnect with my original route about 40 miles ahead. I wasn't thrilled about the detour, especially on unfamiliar back roads in these conditions, but I didn't have much choice. The exit itself was barely visible, just a small break in the snowbank created by the plow. The road it led to was narrow, unplowed, and seemed to disappear into dense forest. My GPS insisted this was the correct route, so I carefully maneuvered my 18-wheeler onto the smaller road, immediately feeling the tires sink slightly into the accumulated snow. After about 15 minutes of nerve-wracking driving, the snow abruptly stopped. Not gradually. It was as if I had driven through a curtain. One moment it was a blizzard. The next it was completely clear, with stars visible in a surprisingly clear sky above the tree line. The temperature outside seemed to have risen as well. The ice that had been forming on my windshield was now melting. This sudden weather change was strange enough to make me pull over for a moment. I checked my GPS, which showed I was on the right track, though the map for this area seemed unusually bare of details. I tried calling my dispatch to confirm the road closure on the main highway, but found I had no cell service, not unusual in remote areas. I decided to continue on the detour route. The road conditions were much better here, though the road itself was incredibly narrow for a commercial truck. It wound through dense forest, with tall pines pressing close on both sides, their branches occasionally scraping against the top and sides of my cab. After driving for another 20 minutes or so, I realized something odd. I hadn't seen a single road sign, mile marker, or any indication of where exactly I was. There had been no intersections, no driveways, not even a hunter's trail connecting to this road. Just the continuous winding path through increasingly thick forest. I checked my GPS again, but now it was behaving erratically. The screen kept zooming in and out on its own, and my position markers seemed to jump around rather than following a consistent path. Eventually, it froze completely, then restarted itself only to show signal lost. That's when I noticed something else concerning. My truck's temperature gauge was rising despite the cold weather, and the engine was making a subtle but unusual knocking sound I hadn't heard before. I knew I couldn't risk a breakdown out here, wherever here was. I decided to pull over at the next available wider section of road to check under the hood. About a mile later, the trees receded slightly on one side, providing just enough space to pull the truck completely off the road. I grabbed my heavy coat and flashlight and stepped out into the night. The silence hit me immediately. If you've ever been in a remote forest at night, you know there's usually some ambient sound, wind in the trees, distant animal calls, something. But here, the silence was absolute, pressing against my ears like a physical presence. Even the idling engine of my truck seemed muffled, as if the sound couldn't properly travel through the air. I popped the hood and checked the engine but found nothing obviously wrong. The temperature was already dropping back to normal, and the knocking sound had stopped. It was as if the truck had been responding to something in this environment rather than experiencing a mechanical issue. As I closed the hood, a movement at the forest edge caught my eye. I swung my flashlight toward it, illuminating nothing but dense underbrush and tree trunks. I was about to dismiss it as imagination when I heard it, a soft rustling sound, like something moving through the undergrowth, circling around to the other side of my truck. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is someone there?" No response, but the rustling stopped immediately. I walked around the front of the truck, scanning the tree line with my flashlight. The beam seemed weaker than it should have been, barely penetrating the darkness between the trees. That's when I noticed the footprints in the thin layer of snow covering the ground. They emerged from the forest, crossed the clearing where I was parked, and disappeared back into the trees on the other side of the road. But they weren't animal tracks, or even normal human footprints. They were perfectly circular impressions, about 8 inches in diameter, pressed deep into the snow as if made by something incredibly heavy. They formed a straight line across the clearing, with exactly the same distance between each impression, like something moving with mechanical precision. A cold that had nothing to do with the weather spread through me. I swept the flashlight across the tree line again, and this time I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart nearly stop. A tall, thin shape standing between 2 distant trees, unnaturally still. My flashlight beam seemed to slide off it, unable to properly illuminate its features, but I had the distinct impression it was watching me. I backed toward my truck, never taking my eyes off the spot where I'd seen the figure. As I reached for the door handle, I heard a sound from the opposite side of the road. The same rustling, but faster now, like something moving quickly through the underbrush. Then another sound joined it from a different direction, then another, until it seemed like the entire forest around me was in motion. I practically threw myself into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. As the headlights came on, I saw them. Multiple tall, thin shapes standing at the edge of the tree line all around the clearing. They remained just beyond where the light could fully reach them, but I could make out enough to know they weren't human. Their proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, torsos too narrow, heads oddly shaped. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road as quickly as I dared, hands shaking on the steering wheel. In my mirrors, I could see shapes moving out of the forest into the clearing I'd just left. Their movements jerky and unnatural. I accelerated as much as I could on the narrow road, taking curves faster than was safe, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever I had encountered. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes of terrified driving, the road widened and I saw something that nearly made me sob with relief. A reflective road sign indicating a junction ahead. As I approached, I realized I was coming back to the main highway, though the GPS was still showing signal lost. When I reached the junction, I was shocked to see it was the same exit I had taken for the detour. Only now I was approaching it from the opposite direction. Somehow the road had led me in a circle, but that wasn't possible. I had been driving consistently in one direction, away from those things in the forest. I pulled onto the main highway, which was now clear of snow and fully passable. There was no sign of the road closure my GPS had alerted me to earlier. In fact, the road looked like it had been plowed recently, with no evidence there had ever been a significant snowfall. I drove nonstop until I reached a truck stop about 50 miles later. Once there, I checked my GPS again. It was working perfectly now, showing no detour and no record of the road I had just traveled. According to its history, I had never left the main highway at all. Even stranger, when I checked my truck's dash camera, which I always keep running, the footage showed me driving continuously on the main highway through light snow. There was no evidence of the detour, the clear, starry sky, or the clearing where I'd stopped. According to the camera, I had never left Route 302, but I know what I experienced. And I know I'm not the first or the last to be directed off the main road into something waiting in those woods. In the following months, I researched the area and found scattered reports dating back decades. Drivers experiencing sudden weather changes, being forced onto detours that shouldn't exist, encountering strange phenomena in the forest along that stretch of highway. Local legends speak of an echo road that appears during storms, a path that seems to offer safety, but actually leads travelers to something ancient that lives in those woods. Something that can manipulate technology, create illusions, and lure the unwary off the proven path. I've changed my route since then. I refuse any jobs that would take me back through that part of Idaho. And I've learned an important lesson. When your GPS tells you to turn off a main road into darkness, sometimes the safest decision is to stop and wait for the storm to pass. Because some detours don't lead back to the highway, no matter what your technology tells you.